The room froze as a billionaire laughed into the microphone, pointing at a small black girl standing alone near his vault. Cameras were rolling. Power was watching. To him, she wasn't a child. She was a joke. Then Richard said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Open my safe, and I'll give you 100 million!" People laughed. Aaliyah didn't. What Richard didn't realize, this moment of humiliation was the exact second he made a mistake that would destroy everything he controlled. Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach, and subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Aaliyah moved through life with quiet focus, the kind learned early when you grow up watching what power does to people who don't have it. Mornings were careful. Shoes were worn but clean. Her backpack held more tools than toys. Denise worked long shifts cleaning offices most people never noticed, and Aaliyah learned to stay small without becoming invisible. The world didn't bend for girls like her, but she refused to bend either. Aaliyah Carter carried that lesson with her everywhere. The building they walked into that day wasn't welcoming. It was polished, controlled, and cold in ways that didn't need signs to explain who belonged. Security eyes followed movement too closely. Smiles stopped short. Denise felt it immediately. The way respect became conditional, the moment uniforms and wealth filled the room. Denise Carter had seen this before. Systems that looked fair until you stood inside them. At the center of it all was confidence dressed as generosity. The man hosting the event loved attention, loved being seen as powerful and playful at the same time. His jokes landed hard on people who couldn't push back. Richard Holloway didn't see harm. He saw control, and the room was built to support it. Around him, silence did most of the work. Engineers watched without speaking. HR framed everything as optics. Linda Brooks smiled when cameras passed and tightened rules when they didn't. Near the edge of the room, Mark Reynolds studied systems instead of people, convinced intelligence mattered more than impact. What no one noticed was how Aaliyah listened. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. She absorbed patterns the way she'd been taught. Those lessons came from evenings spent with an old workbench and patient hands guiding hers. Calvin Carter had shown her how machines told the truth long before people ever did. Not everyone missed it. Anika Patel watched quietly, sensing something others ignored. And somewhere outside the spotlight, knowledge existed that would matter later. Knowledge carried by Dr. Card. Eleanor Whitman, waiting for the moment arrogance crossed a line it couldn't erase. The room felt calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before something breaks. The laughter didn't fade, it spread. What started as a joke hardened into a spectacle, and Aaliyah felt the air shift around her. Eyes stayed locked on the vault, not on the child standing in front of it. Aaliyah Carter noticed how quickly curiosity turned into permission. Permission to mock, to test, to humiliate without consequence. The room rewarded confidence, and cruelty wore it well. Denise stayed close, her body angled protectively even when no one was touching her. She recognized this environment immediately, the kind that smiled while deciding how far it could push. Denise Carter felt the familiar pressure to stay quiet, to not make things worse, to accept whatever came next so long as it ended quickly. But the way people watched her daughter made silence feel heavier than risk. The man at the center enjoyed the attention. Richard Holloway moved with the ease of someone used to being obeyed, his voice carrying without effort. He leaned into the moment, knowing the cameras would frame him as bold, playful, untouchable. "Go on, show everyone what you got. Don't waste our time." The words weren't encouragement. They were control. Aaliyah didn't flinch, but the room tightened. Engineers glanced at one another, waiting for failure. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else checked their phone. The message was clear. This wasn't about possibility. It was about proving a point. HR stepped in to manage appearances, not people. Linda Brooks shifted positions, subtly blocking Denise from the center while keeping the cameras clear. She spoke softly to staff, framing the moment as harmless, as inclusive, as something that would look good later if it ended the right way. No one challenged her. Near the vault, systems were already stacked against the child. Mark Reynolds watched with narrowed focus, confidence rooted in credentials and hierarchy. He didn't see injustice. He saw an experiment that couldn't possibly work. This is pointless. She doesn't understand what she's touching. The dismissal landed hard. Denise's chest tightened, but Aaliyah stayed still. She remembered evenings spent learning patience instead of speed, listening instead of guessing. Those lessons didn't come from books or classrooms. They came from careful hands and quiet certainty. Calvin Carter had taught her that machines always told the truth. You just had to know how to listen. Around them, silence became participation. People stood close enough to intervene but chose not to. Fear hid behind professionalism. Curiosity hid behind neutrality. Even those who felt uneasy stayed quiet, afraid of being seen as difficult. Not everyone missed what was happening. Anika Patel noticed the way Aliyah studied the vault, not with excitement, but with intention. She recognized the posture, the focus, the kind that came from understanding rather than hope. Anika said nothing, but her attention never left the child. The pressure increased. Richard smiled wider, feeding off the tension he created. You wanted a chance? This is it. Fail fast so we can move on. The room reacted exactly how Power expected. Laughter returned, sharper this time. Denise felt the sting of it land on her skin. She leaned closer, voice low, meant only for her daughter. You don't owe them anything. I'm right here. The words steadied Aliyah more than applause ever could. She nodded once, not looking back. Her focus narrowed, shutting out the noise. That calm seemed to irritate the room. Authority doesn't like when fear refuses to show up. From the edge of the crowd, concern traveled quietly. Somewhere beyond the cameras, knowledge existed that would matter later, knowledge carried by Dr. Eleanor Whitman, though she wasn't visible yet. The kind of knowledge that recognized arrogance before it collapsed. Richard took another step closer, voice rising so no one could miss it. Tick-tock. Let's see how long this lasts. That was the line. The moment the spectacle crossed into something darker, Denise felt it. Anika felt it. Even a few in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing the balance slipping. But no one stopped it. The room held its breath, not waiting for success, but for failure. And in that silence, the injustice fully revealed itself. The countdown on the screen kept moving, but the room felt stuck. Every second stretched, heavy with expectation. Aliyah's hands rested against the cold surface of the vault, her breathing slow, controlled. The noise around her blurred into something distant. Aliyah Carter wasn't performing anymore. She was listening, the way she'd been taught to listen when answers hid beneath distraction. Richard paced behind her, confidence sharp and impatient. He had already decided how this would end. To him, this was theater. Failure would prove his point, and the room would laugh it off. Richard Holloway leaned forward, voice cutting through the silence. Enough. This is embarrassing. Step aside. The command snapped the air. Denise felt her chest tighten, anger pushing past fear. She saw the cameras, the smiles waiting for humiliation. Denise Carter stepped closer, refusing to disappear. She's a child. You made this a joke. Now let her finish. The words didn't stop him. Richard waved a hand, signaling security, signaling control. That was when the injustice peaked, when authority decided it no longer needed permission. The room shifted uneasily. Someone whispered. Someone else raised the phone higher. Mark moved closer to the console, ready to call it. He'd waited for this moment, certain the system would protect him. Mark Reynolds didn't look at Aliyah. He looked at Richard, waiting for approval. This ends now. She failed. The sentence landed like a verdict. Aliyah didn't turn. She felt it then. The vibration beneath the noise, the truth hidden under the surface. Her hands paused. She adjusted once, carefully. The vault responded. The sound was subtle but unmistakable. Silence slammed into the room. Anika noticed first. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing, recognition flashing across her face. What others missed, she couldn't unsee. Anika Patel watched the readouts flicker, then stabilize in a way they weren't supposed to. Before Richard could speak again, a new voice cut through the tension, calm, precise, impossible to ignore. Stop. Don't touch anything. The room turned. Authority had entered without raising its voice. Dr. Sis. Eleanor Whitman stepped into view, her presence steady, her eyes already reading the situation. She didn't look at Richard first. She looked at the vault, then at Aliyah. The power shift hadn't happened yet, but it was close. Dr. Whitman moved slowly, deliberately, examining what everyone else had dismissed. The room waited, confused now, uncertain. Richard tried to recover, laughter thin. This is unnecessary. She's done. Dr. Whitman didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried weight earned over decades. No. What's unnecessary is pretending this system works the way you claim it does. That was the moment. The room leaned in. Cameras adjusted. Richard's smile faltered for the first time. Richard Holloway took a step back as Dr. Tarking. Whitman explained what Alalia had already discovered. How the spectacle was built on misdirection. How the truth sat underneath arrogance, waiting to be heard. Mark's confidence cracked. He stared at the data, color draining from his face. Mark Reynolds realized the system wasn't failing. It was being exposed. Denise felt it too. The sudden shift in the air. This wasn't about proving intelligence anymore. It was about revealing lies. Alia made the final adjustment. The vault responded instantly. The sound echoed. Clean, final, undeniable. The room exploded into noise, but Richard couldn't hear it. His world had gone quiet. He stared at the open vault, disbelief written across his face. The joke was gone. Control was gone. Richard Holloway looked smaller now, trapped by the moment he created. Dr. Whitman turned to him, her tone measured but unyielding. You underestimated her, and you exposed yourself. No one laughed this time. Denise reached for Aaliyah, tears burning, pride overwhelming. Denise Carter didn't cheer. She stood tall, watching the system fold under its own weight. Aaliyah finally stepped back, exhaustion settling in. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She had done what she came to do. Aaliyah Carter looked at the open vault, then at the faces around her, faces that now understood too late. The balance had shifted, and there was no closing it again. The room didn't recover. It recalculated. What happened couldn't be spun, softened, or edited away. The vault stood open, but the real damage was already done. The laughter that once protected power vanished, replaced by silence thick with accountability. Richard Holloway tried to speak, then stopped. He understood it now. The moment he turned humiliation into entertainment, he gave away control he could never reclaim. Decisions followed quickly and publicly. Contracts were paused. Investigations were announced. Boards didn't debate. They distanced themselves. The same authority that once shielded him now stepped back, leaving consequences exposed. There was no quiet exit, no graceful fall. Richard Holloway became the example he never thought he could be. Across the room, dignity stood where spectacle once lived. Aaliyah Carter didn't raise her hands or celebrate. She stood steady, exhausted, but unbroken. The system had tested her in front of witnesses and failed. Validation didn't come as applause. It came as recognition she couldn't be erased or dismissed again. Denise felt the shift settle into her bones. Years of swallowed frustration released without words. Denise Carter saw her child seen, not as a prop, not as a problem, but as truth standing in plain sight. For the first time in that building, silence worked in her favor. The professionals who enabled the moment felt it too. Linda Brooks couldn't frame this away. Policies didn't protect intent when exposure stripped excuses bare. Mark Reynolds avoided eye contact, knowing credentials couldn't outrun evidence. Systems that once hid behind complexity were suddenly simple and accountable. Not everyone left unchanged. Anika Patel carried the moment forward, no longer willing to stay quiet when truth surfaced. And when Dr. Eleanor Whitman spoke to the press, she didn't soften the lesson. She named it clearly. Power collapses when it underestimates who is listening. Later, in a quieter space, memory anchored meaning. Calvin Carter had taught Aaliyah that truth lives beneath noise, waiting for patience instead of permission. That lesson didn't just open a vault. It exposed a system that mistook cruelty for confidence. This wasn't a victory wrapped in comfort. It was justice delivered without apology. A child stood firm. Power cracked. And the world watched, because racism doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it jokes, sometimes it smiles, and sometimes it forgets who's paying attention. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our community's fight to be seen. And don't forget to hit the like button. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.